Welcome back to Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. If you're watching on YouTube right now, I'm very clearly in a different area than I normally record in. I look like I'm around like a campfire. I'm kind of dim around the eyes. It's just kind of a weird vibe going on here. Also, my screen's a little blurry. I don't know. I almost kind of like it. It's kind of like I'm like this incognito dynasty player. I don't know. So
You kind of look like a comic book villain a little bit, right?
Yeah,
like this
I'm
is like the
here.
origin story right now.
Yeah, in his lair.
So here we go. So we're talking rookie QBs to start off with. There's a lot going on with these rookie QBs, guys. We got Caleb Williams, who's a mess right now. We got Drake May, who's everybody's darling. It's a lot of fun stuff going on. JJ McCarthy had his second knee surgery today. So we got a lot to talk about. We're going to go through the rookies. We're going to go through the vets. But first, Brian, play that Fat Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
And it's funny, I mentioned we went through the quarterbacks for rookies, and I didn't even mention who is arguably 101 overall in a startup right now, Jaden Daniels. So we got four very prolific, as in good, but also volatile dynasty values right now for the quarterback position. So, Brian, start us off. Like, first off, how would you rank between Caleb Williams and Drake May? Because that's kind of like a hot topic right now, I would say.
It's a question that I'm not sure I'm ready to go on record for, but for the sake of our episode here, I'm still going to take Caleb Williams, but it's something that I felt very, very, very strongly about that even a month ago. And it's starting to it can shift very quickly. I think the landscape of like this rookie class in general, I think, has had a lot of movers and shakers, and quarterback is certainly a part of that. I think Jaden Daniels is, I think, the clear cut. I think everyone agrees. I don't think we even really have to spend a lot of time on. He's the quarterback one of this class. And I think JJ McCarthy is probably quarterback 4. And that's where the 2-3 is. It gets exciting. I have a feeling, I have an inkling of what Matt's answer is going to be. So, save us a suspense here, Matt.
I would rather have Drake May than Caleb at this point, but I do still consider them very close in value. Recently, I did make a trade with Jacob where I traded Drake May straight up and I received Caleb, so kind of the opposite of that, but that was more to balance exposure.
That was also like 2 weeks ago, maybe?
Yeah, that was about 2 weeks ago. So I don't know if I would
pretty
still make
disastrous weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, right now I still have a lot more May than Caleb, and I wouldn't make any more of those trades to flatten out the exposure. But I do think people are overreacting a little bit to Caleb, just based on our group chat and people that we're talking to. Like people that are pretty smart are, ready to call him a bust and say like, yeah, your rookie year's been that bad that I'm writing you off. And I just think that's completely nonsensical. It's ignoring a lot of context, I think.
Yeah, you can almost liken the Caleb versus Drake discussion very similar to Marvin Harrison versus Neighbors, like call it week 2 or 3. You had this pop Neighbors game, or a couple of games from Neighbors, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. had a pop game. And I think there was a lot of people, myself included probably, that were kind of holding on like, you know what, let's like see a little bit more than just like the first couple of weeks, then just to go ahead and crown Neighbors. And I kind of feel that way about Caleb Williams right now, where I just kind of want to see more. I still want to keep him above Drake May. The issue for me, though, is that my priors were that Drake May was going to be this rushing quarterback and he was going to do what it is that he's doing right now. And so it's harder for me to hold on to that or to give up on that and continue to have Caleb Williams ahead. So if I was given the opportunity to trade away a Caleb Williams for a Drake May, I probably would. And I only have one Caleb Williams share in 15 Dynasty leagues. It's actually a league that Brian and I are in together. And David Plout is the Drake May owner, and he is an avid Drake May fan and a Patriots fan. So I haven't even wasted my time on that offer. So I'll be holding Caleb Williams. I think another interesting thing with Caleb Williams is that, let's say you are obviously if you got Caleb Williams, you probably were a hefty rebuild team. mean, people were just decimating their rosters last year to go get Caleb Williams at the 101. So
Yeah.
you're most likely not contending this year. And if your rebuilds are going like some of my rebuilds, you may not be contending next year either. So it may just be, you know what, hold on, and let's just kind of see where this thing goes. Shane Waldron's a joke. Matt and I have been crushing Shane Waldron since the summer when we went through all the teams. And he's fired. So, I mean, I think let's see how things kind of play out for Caleb Williams. I don't know that I'm going out and trying to buy unless there's maybe an opportunity where I can shift cheaply. So let's say like let's use you're a rebuild, Baker Mayfield and a 2 for Caleb.
Yeah, I would pay that for Caleb, but I
don't think it's high enough. Let's go Baker. Let's go who's a little bit higher on the list. Let's go let's just go Baker and 2-2s. That might be a better starting point.
That is, I think that's about fair.
That whole range, like Baker, Goff, Tua, Dak is kind of in that range now. We'll get to Dak later, but some of those guys. All right, here's one for you, Brian. Purdy. Let's say you're a rebuild and you've got Purdy. Is that one you're looking to shift to Caleb?
I would make that move.
You would shift Purdy for Caleb. I don't know if I could bring myself to. I probably would. Yeah, if I was a rebuild. If I'm contending right now, there's no way I can do that.
So 2 things I wanted to comment on, and it's not going to go too far off base here. Hopefully, one, you mentioned your rebuild and a lot of other people's rebuilds, myself included, that maybe are going sideways. I think the new 1-year rebuild is probably not going to happen unless you're playing in a super weak league. That's my opinion.
I agree.
Too many things have to go your way. Like if you land Puka and whatever, that speeds things up, but that's not a sustainable thing.
And in a sharp league, you have to tank so much harder.
It's just not going to. I don't think it's really plausible. And the expectations. That's what leads me to my next point. Expectations of Caleb Williams versus Drake May. Everyone is expecting Drake May to anything he gets is gravy with the weapons they have, everything, like just offensively, their coach. There's a lot of concerns, I think, coming in where Caleb Williams was hyped up as not only this bulletproof prospect, but he has all of these weapons. He has DJ Moore. They brought Keenan Allen in. People think Cole Kmet is good for some reason. Rome Odunze, top 10 wide receiver. And honestly, the funny thing is of that entire offense, the only person that is exceeding expectations and honestly having a pretty solid season is DeAndre Swift, who everyone's kind of like cast aside. That I think that's the most interesting part. If you sold me on DeAndre Swift would be doing what he is doing currently in the preseason, I would be like, wheels up. He's a top 5 dynasty quarterback, and the rest is history. And that's what's kind of interesting to me, is that obviously is not the case right now, and people are jumping ship left and right.
Yeah, some of the numbers really are just fucking awful with Caleb, where I understand, especially people that are, more data inclined are getting ready to jump ship, and, some of his EPA per play numbers, stuff like that are trending towards, Bryce Young rookie level of terribleness. And I think that's where you just kind of got to watch it a little bit. We beat up Waldron enough and his misuse of the offense and some of their offensive line protection schemes, etc. But if you just watch the Bears, especially, some of their better games, like against Jacksonville, against the Rams, against Carolina, like he doesn't, you can see the traits. Like with Bryce Young halfway through the year last year, I was like, I just can't understand how this guy will eventually be good. Like his absolute ceiling is like Teddy Bridgewater, like Derek Carr to me. Whereas Caleb, you see him throwing on the run, like throwing bullets to 20 yards downfield. The deep accuracy is just a fucking disaster. And I don't really know that, like, that wasn't the case in college. I don't know if I don't really know what's causing that, but I expect it to get corrected. Other than
I can
that,
tell
I
you
think
one
this is
thing.
just typical rookie wall stuff, basically.
Yeah, and I can tell you one thing: Shane Waldron's not helping him at all. And speaking of kind of shit show offenses, the Colts and Brian's Colts have been just an absolute disaster of an organization the last couple of weeks. I think everyone decided that Shane Steichen was the GOAT there for a couple of years, and now he's proving himself. Like, I'm not sure he's going to hold his job through the rest of the year. And so now they're going back to Anthony Richardson after just an inept decision making over the last couple of weeks, just running the organization to the ground. So they're going back to Anthony Richardson. I know Anthony Richardson's not a rookie quarterback, but where would you slide him into this rookie QB discussion? So we've got the top four. Obviously, he's behind Jaden Daniels. I'm assuming he's behind Caleb and Drake May. I guess from a value standpoint, how far is he behind those guys? And then where would he?
And is he behind Bo Nix? He's behind Bo Nix.
McCarthy, Bo Nix. Yeah, is he behind either of those guys?
What do you think, Brian?
Man, that's tough because
I mean, I think he might have started less games in his career than Caleb Williams. It's probably around the same.
Yeah, he has 10 NFL career starts. 10 start. Yeah, so I think Caleb
Williams. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I would take him, Anthony Richardson, over JJ McCarthy because they're both kind of still very much mystery bags, I guess. Or I wouldn't say I would definitively take him above, but like I could see an easy argument to be made for that. Because we just like they're both kind of like I'm not sure what they are, right? We've seen now X amount of games for all of these other rookies, and we can kind of start drawing our own NFL conclusions of what they are or aren't. JJ McCarthy has this second surgery, a weird, interesting college career, I guess you would say. I wouldn't call it prolific. He was successful in a team sense, but I wouldn't say like, wow.
A lot of what we're making on with JJ McCarthy is the KOC. I mean, Kevin O'Connell being his head coach, seeing Sam Darnold be awesome.
This timing is interesting with that, and I'm sure it's not related, but it's interesting when after that they just played the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell comes up and says, "Hey, you got plenty of juice left in you, and you're going to be a starter here pretty soon," and blah 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 blah, and then all of a sudden he's a starter. I don't know, that to me it's like to your point, like KOC is like he's a boost, like a attribute boost to most players. Sam Darnold, for example, is a great example of if you leave people to sink or swim in some situations, they'll succeed. I think Kevin O'Connell and what we thought Steichen was, and other people in what we thought McDaniels was, are like floor and ceiling raisers, and I don't think that's the case with Steichen, unfortunately. And I don't. If I'm Anthony Richardson, I would be confused, pissed, deflated, angry. Maybe that leads to him just coming out and just balling his ass off. Like, I think he has the talent, he has the arm talent, he has the size, he has the speed. I'm hoping and waiting for something to click with him. And for that reason, like, to me, like Bo Nix, I think is kind of he feels like a Daniel Jones type of player for me.
That's a good call.
In the sense of like he's gonna potentially give you some rushing, but what if that rushing falls off? Is the passing going to be good enough? Are the weapons going to be good enough? I don't believe in Sean Payton. I've said that before. So I don't know how to value Bo Nix. Like, I think Bo Nix is an interesting person for us to talk about here. And like,
all right, so Matt, let me ask you this. We'll go back to Bo Nix. Matt, let me ask you about Anthony Richardson really quick. Coming out of the injury, what do you think his dynasty value should be? Or not the injury, coming out of the benching, what do you think his dynasty value should be if somebody wants to buy?
Like very late one. That's the most I would even consider paying, because I think the thing with, like, I would rather have McCarthy than Richardson, and I think I would rather have Bo Nix, but I do think it's close. But the thing I think we have to take into consideration with Richardson is real life and dynasty wise, his value insulation is kind of gone.
Yeah.
Like he already did the benching. We're bringing him back now. Like once there's a second benching, his like he'll fall to Fields value where like what would you pay for Fields right now? Like a late second? I wouldn't. But I could understand why someone would. But I think, one more benching and it falls that way. So I would take Bo Nix over Richardson. I would take JJ McCarthy. I think they both have a lot more value insulation at this point. And Bo Nix, I mean, none of us were fans of him around draft season as a college prospect. The landing spot's pretty gross. Like, we'll get to Cortland Sutton, funny enough, actually, a little bit later in the show. But Sutton's basically his only weapon. He doesn't really have anybody else. The running game is fucking terrible. I guess their offensive line has been playing well this year. But Bo Nix is like QB 13, something like that, in points per game. He is kind of doing it, like Brian said, a little bit when Daniel Jones was more successful. The same way, a lot of running, not a lot of passing. But he's also in a terrible environment. I actually don't agree with the Sean Payton slander. I think Sean Payton's a great coach. Part of that is because I don't think Bo Nix is very good. And Denver just looks like a well-coached team that, are competitive and winning games this year. They might make the playoffs. So
I can't tell if this is a Bo Nix endorsement or not.
I don't know what to think of him, and I think we're all kind of on the same page.
I think late one, like you said, is probably right. I think that somebody with Bo Nix is probably going to want a mid one for him. But I think
talking about like rookie season, like I think you could in a lot of drafts until like very late, you could get him like early to mid two in rookie drafts. I like that. And I still would love to buy for that. But like you're saying, I don't think that's his value in the market whatsoever at the moment. Especially if someone is invested a mid to late two or a mid two, we'll say, and they're seeing production out of him and like a good deal of success. Like I think there's probably a rational valuation for some managers as well.
First off, I don't think I ever saw Bo Nix make it to the mid two. I think he was going.
I got him 205 a couple times.
Yeah. You're in 80 dynasty leagues. So,
that's what I'm saying. Like I'm just
that's
giving you.
I'm
giving you the wide landscape. We're not saying what
201, 202 was pretty.
201, I think, was most common.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, a very late one. I think that's fair for him.
But I think, like, I guess my overall point was, like, if you told all three of us that we could have a starting quarterback that's borderline QB1, or like a quarterback one at whatever the rookie pick is you determine outside of the first round, that's a pretty good value, and I would pay that today for sure. But to Matt, to your point, I don't think that's what he's going to be valued as at all at the moment.
No, I think he's kind of valued closer to a mid-first, but maybe not quite like a mid-first. But like a couple trades I've seen go down in the last week or so was Nick straight up for Dak Prescott. One I think was like Dak, like Alexander Madison was in there on one of the sides, but that's nothing to me. So that's kind of my point. I would rather have Dak than Bo Nix. I'd rather have Trevor Lawrence. I'd rather have JJ McCarthy still. And those guys are all below Bo Nix on fantasy calc, some by a decent margin.
Are you guys cool with really quickly me taking us in a different direction in a trade that I saw in it today that I forgot to tell you guys about? It'll be a quick tangent. And this is like this is a perfect encapsulation, I think, of like what dynasty football is in general. For if someone's listening that's new to it, values shifting on a drop of a hat, basically. Cedric Tillman, straight up for Jalen Waddle.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm not going to say anything other than
Tillman's interesting. What do you think Cedric Tillman's worth in terms of draft capital?
Not that.
Well, not Jalen Waddle, but okay. What is he, Matt? What is he in terms of draft capital to you? If you had Cedric Tillman, what would it take someone to buy him off of you?
2 twos.
2 twos. Somebody asked me that today. I said 2 twos. And I also said that he is like a bad game away, like a 2 for 25, and he's back to like a 2 like a late 2, but like let's say he goes 6 for 100 and a touchdown, and it's like late 1.
I'm telling like
He's in
history
that range.
truly.
He's in that 2-week bump range. Now he just had a bye week, so that kind of maybe settled the ship a bit. But he's in that 2-week bump range where he goes bananas again, and all of a sudden it's late 1 or bust on trying to trade for him.
I think it's super interesting because the people that are like I like Tillman, but like I'm also trying to be as realistic as possible in a ever changing market, but people are like equating it to like, well, Nico Collins was this, and that. So it's like people just like it's the same thing like Puka 2.0 or the fact that Darnell Mooney was going to be Tyreek 2.0 and like all of these things. Like people like once they see it once, they're like, oh yeah, I want that. So like people are like grasping, in my opinion, even if Cedric Tillman hits, he's not probably going to hit that hard.
He might not, but that's how you go from a team that's
Yeah.
like mid to like, wow, now all of a sudden I have a Puka Nacua. Now I've got him with Justin Jefferson and like ARSD, and now I've got this insane receiving room. So, all right, we just established that it would take 2 twos to sell him. Is it an offensive offer to go offer like a mid to late 2 for him in like every league? Is that a bad offer?
I just don't think anyone will accept it.
Probably not regularly, but in one of your 80 leagues, they might. I mean,
listen,
you're in a lot of leagues.
If you're asking me to do a scientific experiment, I will. I just feel like the hype.
I think we should go through every league and see it. You know, if it's an early 2, because I like in like, I mean, too late, a mid and a late 2 is almost like an early 2 to me, like a 202 type pick. So
yeah,
I'm not sure I'm going to be out sending like a rebuild 2 for him, but a mid to late 2, I think I might just go offer that in every league and just see if I get one.
And I'm not disagreeing with you in the sense of sending it. I think, like if I just throw my psychology hat on, I think what people will view Tillman as, he's going to be the mystery box that people that are tanking are like, well, he's this young guy that's talented, that's shown things. If he doesn't this year, like if he fizzles out, like you're saying, like 2 for 25 or whatever, like it doesn't hurt my tank. But if I do hit, now I have this like massive value growth that I either have this guy, like you said, like a Puka, or I can flip him for like, I don't know, as an elite guy, like Garrett Wilson, Tillman plus for Garrett Wilson or something like that, like where you get like a truly like what we think is more of like an established, money in the bank kind of guy. That's where I think you're gonna land with a lot of managers that have Tillman currently. They're going to, no matter their build, want to hang on to him unless they're pushed off of them.
Yeah, and I think with it to me, it's not just that people are like hopeful or think that it's likely that Tillman becomes like Nico Collins, but kind of to your point earlier, there's so many of these examples: Puka, Nico Collins, Trey McBride at tight end, that last summer were worth less than a second and are now worth close to 2 firsts or more than that. And there's especially people that play in several leagues. Everybody probably has a story of like, man, I sold Puka like after week 1 last year for an early second. So fucking mad about that. I sold Puka and McBride in the same deal before last year, and that sucks for Cole Kmet. So yeah, I think it makes sense to me that people are cautious. There's really no downside to it, because like, let's say Tillman falls, like he goes Travis Fulgham, right, and just disappears. Like, okay, what did I lose out? I didn't get like a mid-second. I don't fucking care. That's not really going to affect.
That's what basically all of the mid to late seconds just did this press class.
Yeah.
Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Jermaine Burton, Jalen Polk.
I'm throwing a hot take out here that if you have one dynasty team, you should have at least 5. That's what I think that's what I feel deep.
Yeah, I like that perspective.
Like I do not recommend doing what I did, or even 10 I could see being overwhelming for some people. But like for you to play the game the right way, in my opinion, and like not be afraid or like too attached to a certain player. If you're like a Cowboys fan, you don't want to trade CeeDee Lamb no matter what, or whatever the thing is. I think 5 is the right number where you can have the diversification aspect. You can have the lack of, you're not going to have fear about moving somebody that is, it might not work out in your favor. Like, cause I think those are the deals that you have to make in Dynasty, and like just hit on them more than you miss on them, sort of thing.
All right, we've talked the quarterbacks. We've gone down the tangent of Cedric Tillman.
Sorry.
Let's move on to the rookie running backs. Kind of a weird group we've got here, guys. So we've got Tyrone Tracy, who's obviously popped very nicely. Bucky, who's popped definitely well above his value was. He was drafted in basically the 3rd round in all the leagues, and now he's worth every bit of a 2. Jonathan Brooks, who took a hit on the Chuba Hubbard signing, which, by the way, the Panthers would have just that organization, they're just a class act of shit is what they are. So they signed Chuba Hubbard and kind of knocks Jonathan Brooks down. And then Audric Estime, he seems to be the lead 1st and 2nd down back for the Broncos now. So let's talk Tyrone Tracy first. I think he's like kind of trending towards that like late 1st value. Matt, is that accurate in your perspective? I only have like a couple shares of him, but I don't think I'm trading him for 2 twos.
Yeah, so that came up in our group chat where I forgot what the trade was, but I said essentially I would value Tracy close to a late one. Like I wouldn't pay a late one for Tracy right now. I don't think, but I would pay a 201 for him. So if it's a team that is, if I think I'm going to be contending next year and someone wants guaranteed 201 in 2025, I would definitely send that for Tracy, because I would love for 201 who I draft next year to turn into what Tracy's doing right now. Bucky, I think, is close to that. So
I'm not as close there.
To go across positions here, I actually tried to move a Tracy share on a contending team I have where I'm stuck with Cole Kmet's bum ass as my tight end 1. Don't really have a good tight end 2. So Paul Patterson, who's in a few leagues with us, I offered him Tracy for Njoku, and he is Njoku and Kincaid, and he didn't accept that, and he countered and offered Kincaid for Tracy.
Man, he is so sorry.
So I didn't have any Kincaid shares in all my leagues.
You're lucky.
So yeah, it's kind of like a blind spot, and I was going back and forth on it, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, his game log is pretty weak, and then apparently he's hurt now, and it could be like a PCL sprain. I don't really know. I just found that out like a few hours ago. So yeah, we didn't.
I like the offer you made for Tracy for Njoku. I think that's a fair offer. I mean, the thing with Kincaid right now, I definitely think he's like nearing death for like tight end, like being a tight end 1. So in other words, a top 12 tight end for Dynasty. Definitely. But basically all they do are run like little 3-yard out routes or like little bubble screens for him, because it's like they get through the like a quarter and a half, like, oh, we haven't thrown to Kincaid, it's time for his 5-yard bubble screen. And that's what they do like 4 times a game. So he gets you your 6 points in tight end premium leagues and about 30 yards per game. I mean, he's pretty sorry for an excuse of a tight end right now. There'll be like one time a game where I'm watching and I see like this sick catch by a big white guy with a number 80 in the 80s. I'm like, nope, that's Dawson Knox. Never mind.
Dawson Knox. Yep.
Yeah. And so it's just like, this guy is so disappointing. Maybe it's true. Like, remember last year we would hear people say like, oh, Kincaid can't be a top end tight end because of Dawson Knox, and we all laughed at them. I think they were right. I think that Kincaid couldn't be a top end tight end because of Dawson Knox, but in reality, it was because Kincaid's not very good.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
I think
I only
that's
have
like
one
the
share
same
of him
statement.
out of 15 leagues. I feel pretty good about that. I was able to. I shifted off some and like to like Hawkinson, who's like I think my most owned player. I think I've got him like 7 of my leagues. So I feel very good to not be a bag holder of Kincaid, but I did have several at one time. But if you've got a way to get out of Kincaid, I would definitely recommend. I think that we are getting to a point soon where it's like he's not even worth like an early second. I traded one Kincaid probably like week 3 or 4, maybe a little later than that. I traded him for JMO and what will end up being the 202. And I think I got laughed out of the chat. So, it's probably still only about fair at this point, but I feel great that I got out of him at that point.
Todd, let's talk a couple hypotheticals then. Like you have Dalton Kincaid, someone offers you Travis Kelce in a, let's say like not an alt, like we'll say you're like in 4th place. So you're somewhat there.
Yeah, so Travis Kelce goes into like a broader discussion for me, and I think we've talked about it before, but like I just don't really want anything to do with an old guy like that that's like got like a year to go. So I would rather go and try to move like for Goddard in a type of deal where I'm giving up maybe some points that Kelce will give me, but at least I'm getting some years down the road. I mean, not Kincaid for Goddard. I'd rather like do some sort of deal with Goddard is what I'm saying.
So
ultimately, if I had no other option, I probably would go with Kelce if like
in a vacuum.
Hold on. So what if you were getting Travis Kelce type production at like 24, 25 years old? So Cade Otton or Kincaid?
Oh, I think that Cade Otton has a major case to be ahead of Kincaid at this point. I think that we are really not us three, but I think we as a dynasty community are really overlooking the fact that he has been trash. The only way that he has been,
I'm with you. I'm not.
The only way that he has stayed afloat in any capacity at this point is because he gets these. I mean, if you go through and look at his targets, he gets some stuff downfield, and I will admit Josh Allen has missed him on a few. But like most of his stuff downfield, he doesn't really get open downfield. All of his catches, it seems like, are just like are in and around the line of scrimmage. He will get like 1 or 2 a game where it's like 10, 12 yards. You're like, okay, can we get like 4 or 5 more of those? No, it's just that 1 per game. Oh, nope, that's Dawson Knox. Never mind.
It's bad when you're chasing like a ceiling of like 5 for 60. If that's like our like threshold of like,
I would be thrilled. I would be thrilled with that.
All right, so real quick, just to wrap up the rookie running backs, it sounds like I think I'm higher than you. I'm definitely higher than you on Bucky, Todd. But Brian, what do you think that Bucky is worth right now? Like, what would you pay in draft capital to acquire Bucky Irving?
Probably like two mid to late 2s. That's all I would probably pay. I'm somewhere, I think, in between. If I'm speculating, I think I'm somewhere in between where you are, Matt, with him and where Todd is. I think he's exceeding what a lot of people's expectations are, but I'm not sure he's going to be a guy that like my ROI is going to be good enough for anything more than that. That's where I'm at.
I think 2 is pretty fair for me, but I just don't think you're probably ever going to get him for that. And I would rather take my chances sending a mid to late 2 during the rookie draft next year and trying to trade it for Aaron Jones, and then taking that other 2 and throwing a dart out there and hope that it turns into the next Bucky Irving or Tyrone Tracy. So you probably got like a 25, 30% chance that you might hit on a guy like that. And then maybe I trade that other 2 for an old head that, when we get to rookie draft season, those old guys, they go for cheap.
I could be wrong. I just feel like the idea and the concept of what Bucky Irving could be is buoying his value more than it should.
Go ahead and get that burp out, man. I can feel it coming. That drink is really getting to you.
Yeah. So I don't know if he'll ever like. I think part of his value gain is still a projection of like, oh, well, now if he gets 20 carries, he's going to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if that ever happens. And I think I'm not going to compare him to like DeAndre Swift, but like that type of thing where I think people were like, now if he gets X, Y, or Z, he's going to be Christian McCaffrey and like that next level, those upper echelon guys.
By the way, DeAndre Swift, great comp. Like, I feel like he is good DeAndre Swift in a sense. Like, when I watch DeAndre Swift, I'm like, oh, this guy sucks. But when I watch Bucky, I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty solid. And then, but they're very like similar. I feel like they're very like similar styles.
Yeah, I mean, I just by the thinnest of margins, I would rather have Tracy because he is almost 3 years older. He is almost 3 years older than Bucky, which is like a knock, but he already has like the starting job. There's not really any projection left other than you got to survive the offseason because you're a day 3 running back, but he has a starting job. And he's getting a very hefty workload. But Bucky has impressed me enough where he looks awesome. Like you said, he looks good, Todd. I think he looks great. Every time I watch the Bucks, I'm like, God damn, Bucky Irving is good. And you know, Rachaad White's not that good at running. Sean Tucker's kind of emerged as like a viable third running back on the team. But Bucky still has managed to eat into a lot of that workload, and I kind of expect that going forward that he's going to be their lead running back. I don't know if he's ever going to get, like Brian said, the 17 to 20 touches a game that you really want for a high-end RB1 finish. But that's why I think I'm comfortable valuing him, like an early second or 2 seconds type thing. Yeah. And I think that's where most people are. And Jonathan Brooks, I don't know what to do with Jonathan Brooks. I have like 1 or 2 shares, and I'm just going to see how it plays out the rest of the year. But I would rather have Bucky at this point because to me, it's like we've seen him be good.
One really nice thing about Tracy, so he's got Singletary as basically the RB2 at this point, and they've crowned Tracy as the starter. Devin Singletary has a $6 million dead cap hit next year. So I don't think that they're bringing in another free agent running back to be in like a triangle together. So I think it's going to be Tracy and Singletary again next year. Maybe they draft another like 5th round type running back or something to be a part of the committee, but it's going to be Tracy and Singletary again next year. I don't think we have that concern that they were to sign some free agent that's going to come in and split work. Kind of like what a really good comparison here would be Tyjae Spears this past offseason, where we were like, okay, Henry's gone. This is Spears' job. Spears got up to like running back 14 or so in Dynasty. I remember he was going like the 6th, 7th round in startups, probably the 7th round in startups. And then all of a sudden Tony Pollard gets signed there. And so now the bottom falls out. I don't think that has a possibility of happening for Tyrone Tracy. So that is a plus.
All right. So that's can wrap the rookie running backs, I think. Unless you guys have any estimated thoughts, I don't. I mean, if you have him, let's see what he becomes. But
I think I'd be comfortable looking to move him if you could get anything. I mean, I don't see him ever having any work in the passing game, and so if he can maybe have another game or two where he has like a kind of a splash, let's call it like 16 for 90 and a touchdown type game where I don't think he's going to have any catches. I don't even know if he has a target this year. Then
trying to get like a mid to late 2.
I think that might be possible. The one with Brooks, I think you might, let's say Brooks is on a contender, and I think that Brooks is probably on a lot of contenders because they draft maybe like a late pick. You might, if you're a rebuild that you think you're going to contend next year, might be a time to go and see if Brooks is available, because this news with Hubbard is really, I mean, it's disappointing for Brooks, but I think that ultimately Brooks is a really good talent, and he's going to end up being kind of their 1A. And we think about guys like, Gibbs is running back 2 or 3 in Dynasty, and he has David Montgomery on his team.
Yeah.
So I think that there's plenty of work to be had for both Brooks and Hubbard, and Brooks can still be a awesome fantasy asset.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good call. I do think Brooks is probably available. Maybe I think he would be an interesting target to try and buy right now. All right. So with the rookie,
would you like, say like Todd, you mentioned like a contender team probably has Jonathan Brooks in a lot of situations. He was a later 1st round pick. Like, are you giving, I don't know, say like Aaron Jones and a small, like Aaron Jones and a 3 for.
Oh
like
yeah,
that
Aaron
type
Jones
of
in a
fit. Like,
3.
yeah,
I thought
yeah,
you were going to say Aaron Jones in a 2, and I was going to say, you know what? Yeah, I'd probably do that if like, let's say I got the rebuild. Let's say I've got at receiver, I've got like an Adams or a Cup. Adams has kind of lost some luster there, so let's go with Cup. Would y'all do Cup? And I think one point that you need to make when you're talking about Brooks is that I am a rebuild maybe this year, but I am planning to contend next year. So, if you're moving a guy like a Debo or an Adams or a Cup, that does kind of put things into a weird spot. So it's maybe this may be a weird situation to even bring up, but like, let's say one of those guys, Cup or Adams and a 2 for Brooks.
That seems a little hefty to me.
That seems a little steeper.
I mean,
yeah. So maybe just like Cup or Adams straight up. What about Debo straight up for Brooks?
Debo hasn't been that great here. That would be my concern with him specifically. But what I had him as his value like 6 weeks ago, let's say, or like beginning of the season, I would definitely have done that then, which is kind of interesting. Not knowing the emergence of Chuba in the contract, I would have made that deal, in September, October. So that's all I really have on that front. But
would you trade away what about like if you had a higher end running back, like a Ken Walker or a Jonathan Taylor, one of those guys, and like 2-2s, and Brooks and 2-2s?
So Ken Walker or 2-2s and Brooks?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, you know what? I was kind of being a fraud contender this year. Next year is really going to be my year. I've got Ken Walker, I got Jonathan Taylor. Let's go ahead and just reset. Let's try to get that pick down to like 103 or 104. Do I move Walker or Taylor for Brooks and 2-2s?
I would feel really uncomfortable if I didn't get a legit first back, and I don't know if Brooks is a legit first.
Yeah, back in the day, you could just do the 1-2 swap all day and be so easy, but the 1-2 swaps don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the hesitation I have with Brooks is like, all right, Carolina does have a good offensive line, but Chuba Hubbard has looked awesome. And Carolina, I don't think they're going to solve that quarterback position anytime soon. And in order to be the Detroit Lions, you need an awesome offensive line. You need good quarterback play. If we go back to like Mark Ingram and rookie year Alvin Kamara type thing with the Saints, they had a good offensive line. They had old Drew Brees, who was still good. You need a good quarterback in order to have two high end running backs. It is possible, but you need a good offensive ecosystem. And to me, that's a tough bet to make. And like with Bucky, Bucky's already attached to Baker in a good offensive ecosystem. And I think Rachaad White is less competition than Chuba Hubbard's going to be. So I just get the feeling that Bucky would be about the same or cheaper than Brooks, and I would just rather go buy him. I guess there is, potential that Brooks just comes back and really does out. Like Chuba's been really good, but Brooks is just that much better and takes over the 1A spot, like you said, Todd. It is possible, but that's why I would be a little hesitant to just pay too much for Brooks right now.
Yeah.
But it, like you said, it could be a good opportunity. All right, let's go to rookie receivers. We can get to Neighbors and Marvin Harrison in a minute if you guys want. I don't have a lot to say on them, but one thing I do think is interesting is like, what are you guys doing right now with Xavier Worthy if you have him? Are you just jumping off the ship for like a mid to late second?
Vomiting in a bag is probably what I'm doing if I've got a lot of Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy to say I have 1 out of 15 Xavier Worthy.
We're almost.
I think you got to hold it.
Yeah, I was just going to say. So to me, we're almost getting to that Quentin Johnson middle of the season last year, where Brian was like, you know what, I'm not selling for a 2 because like at some point he's going to reestablish that he's a 2, or he's not, and I'm going to miss out or whatever. And now you see QJ slowly coming back to life a little bit.
I'd say in most leagues you can probably get a 2 for QJ at this point.
Yeah, or a late 2, yeah, probably.
Yeah, maybe not in like a really sharp league, but I think in most leagues you could get a 2 for QJ. So yeah, I'm not trading Worthy for a 2. I'm probably not even trading him for a non-playoff 2. I trade him for an early 2, but not a non-playoff 2. I think the thing with Worthy though is that
I would trade him for like a 206 right now, but yeah,
yeah,
I don't
I
blame you
wouldn't.
for
So
needing more.
the thing with Worthy though for me is that he is connected to Patrick Mahomes, and at some point Patrick Mahomes is going to do some Patrick Mahomes things, and Worthy's going to be the beneficiary just by happenstance, just like we've seen with guys like Justin Watson or Mecole Hardman. But it's going to be Xavier Worthy, first round wide receiver, and it's going to be just pure luck, basically, that Worthy is the recipient of that. And I think he will have some pop at some point, a la how Quentin Johnson has been just left alone and nobody guarded him. And so, boom, he's like caught a few touchdowns.
I'm not alone. Not necessarily. I might be alone between the three of you, but I'm okay with like holding bags when the shift is too aggressive, and I think the shift is probably too aggressive. To Todd's point, with Worthy right now, that there's going to be some type of swing, even if it's like next off season he looks good in like a Instagram clip or some shit. Like people will lie to themselves, even if he sucks. This is not going to be he's going to have a higher value at some point here in the next 12 months than he is right now. But I also am also not, it's not like a point like Matt, we've joked about this for years, like in Trojan when I traded for Najee Harris because the guy was given away. Like it's not going to be like that where I'm like actively buying him.
Yeah,
I think, but because I think right now Worthy is a big question mark, but he has the things that Todd just mentioned. He has some superior talent that if he figures something out in a week's notice, he could become what he was beforehand, like a 109 to 112 value.
yeah. I mean, the Mahomes has missed him more often than Mahomes usually misses receivers downfield.
I'll give that to Xavier Worthy.
So he really is like been unlucky, and he probably should have like 3 or 4 more catches for like 150 yards and a couple touchdowns that usually Mahomes will hit. But the thing that I keep going back to is like he had the perfect run out, right? Like Kelsey looked washed, Pacheco got hurt, Hollywood got hurt, Rashee Rice got hurt. He had a few weeks between the Rashee Rice and injury and DeAndre Hopkins coming to town.
Oh man, you don't got to convince me that he sucks. Like, I think we're all there. So maybe you're convincing the listener at this point.
Yeah, so I don't know. Basically I would sell him for like a 206 right now. I don't think it'll get that much better, but it would need to be that. I wouldn't sell him for
Xavier Worthy or Cedric Tillman.
I would rather have Cedric Tillman right now, definitely.
Brian, Xavier Worthy or Cedric Tillman?
Yeah, I
would love to trade Worthy for Tillman.
I see that in the trade database on Fantasy Calc. While you're thinking about that one, Brian, there's 2 Josh Downs in there. There's several trades in the trade database. It's interesting. So whenever I go to the trade database, I usually just like slim it down to like 5 assets to get a better sense of like what the trade was. And so there's several trades in here where it's like Xavier Worthy and something for a piece that's a little bit better than Worthy on the value. I'm not explaining this well. Basically, it's a 2-for-1. And it's almost like you're hiding Worthy in the trade. So like if you can get somebody to go and enter it into a trade calculator, they look at it and they're like, oh, this is a fair trade, or maybe I'm winning this trade, but they're not really thinking about how they're getting the Xavier Worthy asset as part of it. So like one of them is Xavier Worthy and where'd it go? Xavier Worthy and Debo for Brian Thomas. That happened today. So I don't think that's happening in many sharp leagues, but if you're in a league with the Brian Thomas owner asleep at the wheel, but also like whenever you think about trades like this and you say, okay, Brian Thomas, that's unrealistic. Well, don't like just look at Brian Thomas. Maybe you could like slide down the wide receiver rankings and let's say, okay, all right, Devontae Smith, he's not looked that great recently. Can I send Xavier Worthy in like a piece that's like wide receiver 30 type value for Devontae Smith? So I think maybe a 2-for-1 where you're hiding Xavier Worthy in the deal might be.
What about like is like Jacoby Myers in that range? Like for someone that's trying to win now, they're not getting the production that they're looking for necessarily. You get Jacoby Myers and like that lottery ticket more or less. It might be a
like
scratcher
Xavier
now.
Worthy for Myers in a second.
Yeah.
I think that's probably doable. Yeah. If somebody was still in on him. Speaking of Kate Otten, Xavier Worthy for Kate Otten straight up. There's 2 Xavier Worthys for Josh Downs, probably a Josh Downs owner asleep at the wheel. Here's the example of exactly what you're talking about, Brian. So I just stumbled upon Xavier Worthy for DeAndre Hopkins and a third. So that's probably about kind of what
Find someone that's like desperate for like points right now, so they think, and then
yeah. So, but I think Matt or Brian, I think you said it. I'm not like out trying to buy Xavier Worthy, but I think he's a hold, and let's just wait and see if he can have like that 3 for 100 and a touchdown type game, and maybe he hits the parlay and he does it back-to-back weeks, and then okay, now we're cooking. Now we can move him in a 2 for maybe like a Devontae Smith type.
What would you, all right, to shift a little bit, what would you add on top of Xavier Worthy right now to acquire Rome Odunze?
That's a good one. So Rome Odunze is interesting because like I feel like every week I watch him. First off, if you followed my Twitter at all in the offseason, I was totally out on Rome Odunze. I had his whole family in my mentions. But with that said, I still ended up with a couple shares of him. And I watch him play. I'm like, you know what? This guy's pretty solid. The issue is that the offense, Shane Waldron's a joke. Fortunately, he's gone. And when I watched Rome Odunze play, he's fairly solid. I think he's leading their team in receiving yards. DJ Moore is kind of a shell of himself. I'm not sure he's even trying right now. But I would probably add for sure a second to Xavier Worthy. I think Rome Odunze is still a strong talent.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I was going to say, I would add an early second to Worthy.
I think that's fair.
And I don't know if that's even doable.
Probably not. Like, I feel like now I'm not in as many leagues as either of you, but in my 15 leagues, I feel like once every couple of weeks, I hear Rome Odunze's name and I go through every league where Rome Odunze's manager, and I'm like, nope, he won't trade him. Nope, he won't trade him. Nope, he won't. Yeah. All right, never mind. There's no Rome Odunze opportunity, so I just give up. So I don't even think I've sent any offers for Rome Odunze in several weeks, but maybe they're starting to get a little bit uneasy. I'm guessing if you want Rome Odunze, you've got to tier down. So you've got to go from one of those receivers and like the wide receiver, let's call it wide receiver 13, because I think there's kind of a tier break when you get after wide receiver 12, which is kind of like the consensus right now. It's like what Brian Thomas Jr. is like wide receiver 12 in most rankings. So I think if you want to get Rome Odunze, you've probably got to trade like a DK, Zay Flowers, Pickens, Jaden Reed, Devontae Smith, and tier down to Rome Odunze, and then add a second. How do you feel? How do you feel about that, Brian? Would you trade? I know you got a lot of Zay Flowers. I'm sure you got some Zay Flowers on some tanks. Zay Flowers for Rome in a second. Call it a mid-second. It's a contender. Call it a late second. Like maybe not a buy team, but like just a playoff second.
I would prefer Zay Flowers, I think.
Matt?
It's right on the range that I think is kind of fair value. Yeah. Like if I wasn't planning on competing this year, I could see doing that. Because I do think that, like what you talked about earlier in the show about Caleb, and we kind of expect him to be fine long term. I really do think the Bears offense is going to look a lot better next year. I don't expect Keenan Allen to be a part of it. And so Rome is an interesting guy that I just don't have any shares of, not intentionally, but it just kind of worked out that way. And I do think that like now is the time to try to get back in, because what if they figure things out down the stretch and then he has like a hot month and all of a sudden he's right side by side with Brian Thomas Jr., who's going to be without Trevor probably the rest of the year. It's a very possible scenario. So, you know, like Rome is a guy that if I'm interested in buying him, I want to buy him soon. And I don't want to wait until the off season because I don't see his value getting that much lower the rest of the year.
Yeah,
like
that's a great point. Yeah, you wait until the offseason and he's going to just arbitrarily jump up to like wide receiver, you know, assuming he keeps a similar type of path that he's on right now. The tier that we just mentioned, he will be in that tier in the offseason just because he's young. Oh, Keenan Allen left. Oh, they got a new offensive lineman. Oh, they got a new head coach. All right, now Rome Odunze is wide receiver 15.
So, man, and this is me definitely in a few different leagues. It does suck if you had like a late first and you ended up taking Xavier Worthy. Because if you didn't take Xavier Worthy, you could have gotten Brian Thomas Jr. Odunze went like 108 or earlier, but you could have got Brian Thomas. You could have had Ladd McConkey, who I would rather have right now than Rome Odunze. Bo Nix, who's increased his value a ton, like we talked about. And then Jonathan Brooks, who, even with the Chuba extension, we're talking about as like a close to a late one value or, you know, didn't lose that much value. So like Xavier Worthy was really the only landmine in the late one, very early second of drafts. And that does kind of suck. But would you guys rather have Odunze or Ladd McConkey right now? Are you with me on Ladd over him or no?
Yes. Ladd.
Okay. So, Todd, what do you say?
I would take Rome Odunze over Ladd.
Okay.
They would be in a similar-ish tier. The thing with Rome to me, though, is that I see a path for him to being a wide receiver one on a team. And that could lead to an offense where if Caleb Williams is good, and I think we still need to assume that he can be solid.
Yeah.
If he is good, then they can be like a 4,500 yard passing type team in the future. That could lead to, like, if you're one wide receiver one for that team, that could be nice. And so I think there's a path still for him to being a top 12 dynasty wide receiver, which is, you know, that's high praise. But I don't have the same confidence about Ladd McConkey as being that. I think his future is probably more in the wide receiver 2 on his team at some point when they get somebody else. Or
Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, or Quentin Johnson. So I don't have as much confidence about Ladd McConkey jumping into like the top 12 at some point.
Yeah, he almost feels like, to me, I'm pretty high on Ladd, but I think he's going to max out at like where Devontae Smith kind of always hangs out, where he's like,
that would be a nice ceiling for him.
Yeah, he's like always at the top of the blob, but he's never quite, or glob, but he never quite escapes the glob.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I'm picturing Ladd. You know,
and always the bridesmaid.
Yeah, and speaking of the glob's been an absolute shit show this year. There's obviously been a few guys. We mentioned Flowers and DK. They've kind of been bright spots, but the glob has been a absolute shit show. And that's why I didn't want to be in the glob coming into that season. So I do have one Ladd McConkey trade that I made this week, actually. I think Brian is in this league. So I traded away Ladd McConkey, Mike Williams, and J.K. Dobbins. I received Chris Olave, Rashad Bateman, and Javonte Williams. So if you just want to like kind of cancel out Bateman and Mike Williams as kind of junk pieces, let's call it Ladd and J.K. Dobbins for Olave and Javonte Williams.
Well, Javonte just almost died this past week.
You could probably cancel him out too.
Yeah. So I have maybe I have a hot take on him. I was basically just trying to get him chucked into this deal. I think that he is let's say 1 year ago today, J.K. Dobbins was dead. Like, we would have viewed J.K. Dobbins as dead. And that's true. Javonte Williams is the type of guy that I think probably will bounce around to other teams and be a team's running back too. And you're like, well, yeah, I guess I can start Javonte this week because, you know, Tyrone Tracy is out. And so I'll start Javonte Williams. And so I think that, maybe he doesn't get like a lead type role that J.K. Dobbins has, but I think that there will be kind of a nice fill position for Javonte on a dynasty roster where you can just be like, yeah, he's one of my running backs that I've got that's a handcuff.
Yeah, I mean Dobbins really hit his nut outcome, like ceiling
And
wise.
my expectation is that this is like a 1-year thing. They'll probably draft somebody. This is a big. I mean, we got to remember that's maybe something we should talk about is that this running back class is probably shaping up similar, at least from a depth standpoint, to the 2017 running back class that kind of changed the whole running back landscape in Dynasty. And so,
Yeah.
any of these guys that are like makeshift starting running backs, very similar to a J.K. Dobbins, you kind of need to expect that team is going to draft like a 3rd-round running back, like an Mario Hampton, or however you spell Amari Hampton, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Caleb Johnson, all those type
Yeah,
guys.
there's all these different guys, and we're not even talking about like Janty, who's going round 1. So I think that a lot of these guys are going to end up losing their jobs, or they're going to be in committees next year. And so I don't want to be caught like holding the bag on a J.K. Dobbins because I was like, I thought he could be my running back 2 coming out of a rebuild. Like, I just don't think that's going to be very realistic. And maybe it happens for a couple of these guys, but I think most of them, it doesn't come through that way.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it's a fair trade, but I don't expect you to agree with this, Todd. I'm not sure where you stand, Brian, but I would rather have Ladd McConkey than Chris Olave right now, I think.
They'd be the same tier for me.
Maybe I'm just getting a little too scared about the Olave concussions, but like he's up to 5. Like that's no joke. That's not 2 or 3. And it's another team that I don't expect to fix their quarterback situation in the next couple of years. He's going to have to deal with Derek Carr. That's a strong downgrade from Justin Herbert. And, I expect Olave to be wide receiver 1 on the Saints for the next couple of years, health permitting, all that. But, when they were both healthy this year, Rashid Shaheed was pretty much equal to Olave in targets. So, even if the Chargers bring in some competition, Ladd McConkey's going to be on a good team with a good offense with a top 7 quarterback in the league. And so he just seems like just a lot safer and with a similar ceiling to Olave.
Yeah, I think that I have them in the same tier. I think that we've seen guys, I don't know about 5 concussions, but we've seen guys go through like the concussion lull where you're like, oh, like he keeps like Brandon Cooks is the one that everybody always throws out there.
Yeah, and then they're fine. Yeah.
And then they're fine. Yeah. I mean, he's gonna sit out the rest of the year. Maybe he'll come back with the skull cap that, like Devon Achane is wearing, but I'm not as concerned. I hope, I'm not, I hope he's okay, but I'm not as concerned about him like long-term from a dynasty perspective that he's going to be like quitting football or something.
Yeah, I'm not, close to that point.
But I think that your sentiment is shared by a lot of people, and it's why if you are a rebuilder, probably a good idea to go out there and test and see if you can get Chris Olave. So, Brian, I'll let you answer it, and I'll kind of check and see what type of trades are out there for Chris Olave right now. Chris Olave versus Ladd McConkey.
I would probably take Ladd. I was going to, without knowing that we were going to go down this road, I was going to ask T. Higgins or Chris Olave.
T. Higgins
because
for me.
Yeah, to me it was a no-brainer. But I talked to Paul and he said they were equal. That's why I was curious what you guys thought on that. To me, it's like I've seen way more on field than with T.
Mm-hmm. T I would have it a tier above both Ladd and Olave.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy there. I would take Ladd. I think Olave is becoming, not to dispute or even disagree at all with what you're saying, Todd, in terms of like go in your league and see if he might be worth a buy. But I think he is kind of he's overrated in my opinion. And that might be shifting now to the point of like any player could be a buy or a sell, and that's why I say 5 teams or more is the best way to play Dynasty. I think people are like waiting for him to do things that I'm not sure he's ever going to do, and that might be ceasing to exist here pretty soon.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to we can't be like prisoners of the moment in that, Like if you go back to his like 20, just go to straight game log for 2023, pretty impressive game logs. He was like putting up some solid numbers, not great touchdowns, solid game logs. Like his peripherals were still really good last year. It's probably going to be something where, yeah, he does need like a better offense around him to maybe like fully hit that. But like him versus T, yeah, for sure. T, I think that it's fine. Like if you're a rebuild, getting 0 points the rest of the year, we talk about that a lot. Is nice. One trade in here that we talked about Jonathan Brooks is Jonathan Brooks and Chris Olave for Drake London.
Yeah, that
I'll take London.
I would take London there, but
Yeah,
it's close.
Pretty close.
Like if you're rebuilding, again, Brooks is kind of a shaky target for me. I understand the case to buy him right now at that type of value. So if you're rebuilding that's close value wise, I think I would just rather have some kind of.
I view that as if you're a big Olave fan, I can't imagine anyone has him above like a 1 and a 2 value, and I can't imagine anyone has Brooks above a 1. I would buy Drake London for 2 1s and a 2. 99 out of 100 times, I think.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it, because in my head I was like, yeah, I'd probably trade, if I was a rebuild, I'd probably trade London for Brooks and Olave. But if you kind of think about it in terms of like what London's value is, yeah, I think you're probably right. Like it's got to be a little bit more than 2 1s, and Olave's no more than a 1, and Brooks, I'm definitely the high man here on Brooks, it sounds like. I think Brooks is probably a 1, but yeah, I mean, the math just doesn't check out there.
I just don't think he would be above that in any situation. I also just think London, for like in this example, he is entered into the doesn't matter your build, get the guy range.
I think that's fair.
I think
only like a couple, like a handful or two.
As we fast forward, 10 months from now, and we're kind of going into the 2025 season. When you combine those two together, I think it's going to be a pretty clear Olave Brooks greater than London. That was my initial thought. But as we sit here today, I would agree that it's on paper London. I just think if you're rebuilding, you think about like August value. Hopefully.
I think the only way it burns you in that deal is if Brooks comes in like gangbuster right away and becomes like 2 1s type of range. Like he's just an absolute stud as soon as he jumps on the field. And I don't see Olave going above 2 1 in my mind anyways, 2 1s.
I think what you're hoping what you're hoping for with Olave is he's worth maybe a 1 right now, and next August he's worth a 1 and a 2. Like I think his injury, you're basically just you're accruing about a second round of value with his injury.
Yeah, agreed. All right. You guys ready to talk about Dak and Trevor? We maybe should have gotten to it earlier, but I think a lot of contending teams, whether they're bye week contenders, playoff fringes, probably have Dak and Trevor, might not have a suitable QB3. I might be in that group of people in a couple leagues. So, Brian, have you kind of made any moves yet to pivot off of Dak or Trevor in that situation?
I've attempted the cheap routes and been mostly unsuccessful. I think I got one where I had Lawrence. I got Mac Jones for a 4th. That's the only time that I've really gotten anything. I've had a couple teams that I thought were just absolute studs that I started 0 quarterbacks this week because of like various buys with the, Jordan Love amongst others. So I've had some teams that the wheels have gone square, and I just personally, and I don't necessarily even recommend this, but me personally as manager, I don't like just like when people try and hold your feet above the fire. I'm not going to just sell on value just because in reality, if you have a strong team, like you can win with one quarterback if it comes down to it. Your margins are just thinner. So I'm not going to like give like a second for like some, dog shit player or something like that. That's going to be
someone
red
probably
zone.
gave a second 3 days ago for Joe Flacco, and he's no longer starting.
I just can't bring myself above a fourth for any of those types of guys. I'm not going to I'd rather roll with Devontae Adams in my super flex than I would putting in Mac Jones for a second or a third. Get fucked.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, two of my contenders have Dak. I had Stafford as the QB3 on one of them, Russell Wilson as the QB3 on the other one. My plan will probably be to right before the deadline. I think the deadline in both of those leagues is the end of week 13. And so my plan in both of those leagues will be to, around closer to the deadline, make sure whoever it is I'm potentially trading for is actually healthy. Or I might just acquire, when I say that, I mean trade for a bona fide player, like trade away Dak and something for a legitimate QB. The alternate option that I will probably do is just sit on Dak and then trade for a QB3 that's like you mentioned, like a Mac Jones or somebody that can just, if let's say Russ lost the job to Fields back and I need a QB2, I would much rather go in with a QB in that slot than a player, because a lot of my teams have a bunch of injuries as well. So it's not like I'm floating around with tons of depth that I can just stick a guy in. So I'll probably look at a QB3 option.
So I'm a little surprised. Or not surprised, but you're typically, Todd, your approach is to hang on to your 25 first when possible until it really comes rubber meets road. To me, this might be a situation where I don't know what the solution is, but getting Baker Mayfield for your first and a small add-on or something like that, maybe that's something to investigate with people in those situations, depending on how high you are on those types of players. Or I don't know, Sam Darnold and a win now running back or receiver for your first, that sort of thing. I think those are possibly things that you could maneuver instead of the Flacco, Mac Jones, Gardner Minshew routes.
So let's just use these two teams for examples. So one of these two teams, I actually traded my first plus just a couple weeks ago for Ken Walker. I think I traded away a first, and I think maybe that first in 2 seconds for Ken Walker. I had Bijan, Pollard, but pretty thin at running back after that. The team was pretty stacked at receiver. So I wanted to bolster the running back room, and then immediately Dak goes down. So traded that pick for Walker. I do have 26 first. So maybe to your point, maybe I can trade one of those and go get a Baker. That one does kind of sound appealing to me. The other one, it's a little bit of I don't have my 25 first, but I've got somebody else's, which is going to miss the playoffs. So yeah, maybe I could take that one and do something creative there. The thing for me though is I love Dak, and I really don't want to trade him unless I was getting really solid value for him, and people are just really down on him. And so
I feel that way about Dak and Trevor.
I just don't think trading him away.
People just don't want them right now.
Yeah, so I don't think trading him away is smart. And so, I do have an issue with getting another quarterback that's high in value, because they are so difficult to trade away when you've got 3 valuable quarterbacks. Nobody wants them until they have to have one. And so if I traded a first for a Baker level player, I'm probably now stuck with for this team, Baker, Dak, and Herbert. And I'm
do you think
holding on too much value here in quarterback?
Speaking just very quickly, both of you, I'm curious what you think for Trevor Lawrence and Dak for different reasons. Dak because he's on the Cowboys, Trevor Lawrence because he was hyped as the Caleb Williams before Caleb Williams. Do you think their situations they have the exact same weapons, the same injury history, the same stats previously, if they're in a different situation? So if Trevor Lawrence was not the first overall pick and the anointed one, and if Dak was not on the Cowboys, he was on the Broncos with the exact same track record, same weapons, whatever else, do you think their value perception changes at all?
No, I don't think so anyway. Maybe with Trevor with the number one.
I don't
overall
think Dax
picking,
would
but
as much. The one thing with Dak is him being connected to Lamb, I think plays into it more than him just like being on the Cowboys. I think it's like, okay, he has like a legitimate big time weapon.
Yeah. So my question is, if
that one
CD Lamb type of wide receiver on the Broncos.
Like he does have a CD Lamb type of.
He has the exact same weapons, the same track record, the same injury history, everything.
I think Dak is pretty insulated in terms of like where his value is, but is in terms of like where he with his situation on the Cowboys. Trevor, I disagree with. I think that he like him being the number one pick, it's like holding all of his value together.
See, the reason I
guess my point, or like what I was trying to get at is that like I think people have their perceptions of them, and that's why they're criminally potentially underrated at times, and including probably right now, is that like people just hate Cowboys often. And like they think they're anointed when they're not. And then Trevor Lawrence, again, people think like, oh, I haven't seen it after this much time. And they're not really digging into like, oh, this was a struggle or that was a struggle. And he's supposed to be doing this no matter what he has in terms of a coach or weapons or whatever else. That's what's like an interesting thought process to me, is that like, I think people's preconceived notions or like take lock is setting in or has set in for both of these guys, and injuries certainly aren't going to, reset that.
People kind of hate Trevor Lawrence too.
Yeah.
That's got to be it, Todd. Because like I do not agree with you that I think the opposite of what you think. You think that being the first overall pick, Trevor is basically overrated by some. And you're maybe talking about me because I think Trevor's fucking good. And
no. I'm saying that's like feeding the fire.
I think people are underrating him.
Yeah, I think that Trevor Lawrence being the first overall pick is what's feeding the fire to people hating him.
Oh,
feeding the fire to like, oh, he didn't live up to the hype, so now I hate him because he sucks versus what I thought he was going to be. Whereas if he had been like, pick 10. And just like, we were just like this quarterback, the Jags drafted that, people like Daniel Jones was, then I think that people would still like not think he's like that good, but they're not like, I feel like people hate him. Like they want him to suffer. I feel like that's what people think about Trevor Lawrence.
I haven't gotten that impression, but like, I do think there's a lot of people that think Trevor's not good, like a bad quarterback. I had someone tell me that today, or over the last couple of days. One of the leagues that Brian's in this league that this happened. I lost Dak, and when I lost Dak, I traded for Trevor, not even thinking that he was hurt that bad. And then now I'm stuck with like a contending team with no QB2. And I've been shopping Trevor around. And like I had the Lamar Jackson owner say, I don't want any part of Trevor. Like I don't want him included in the deal. I don't want him. I don't think he's good. And like I offered the same offer I offered to you, Brian. Brian is Josh Allen. I offered Trevor and Brian Thomas Jr. for Josh Allen, and then I offered that to the Lamar owner. Brian just declined it. But the other guy was like, I just don't want Trevor. And I was like, that's fucking enraging to me because so I think Dak and Trevor are both just buys right now. Like Brian said, I'm not one of those people that is like going to let someone hold a gun to my head. Like, oh, hey, your QB2 got hurt. Like you have to, no, I'm not going to fucking pay up. Like this one guy I asked about Kirk Cousins, because in that league, he has Stroud, Love, and Cousins, and he had Cousins on the block. And he was like, if you sent your 25 first, I would consider it. I'm like, I'm not trading a late first. That's not even a bye week first for Kirk Cousins. Get the fuck out of here. And then like I offered my mid to late second for Russell Wilson, and my buddy Shade was like, no, I'm like, that's not enough. And so I'm just like, and this is like the perfect example of how frustrating this is. This can be dealing with these injuries. I have Christian Kirk on this team. I offered Christian Kirk to the Aaron Rodgers owner who doesn't need him. And he was like, no, don't even want to do that. Not interested in Kirk at all. And then like, Brian, we have a league where you were trying to replace a QB and I offered you Aaron Rodgers for Christian Kirk. And you were like, nah, I'm not paying Christian Kirk for like 1 year of Rodgers. That's the shit that gets frustrating to me is like when you can't make the same deal on both ends
That
of
is
the fucking
annoying.
deal, and you're like nothing like enraging. Like usually I'm a pretty chill guy when it comes to trading and shit like that. These like specific scenarios where you have to trade for need instead of want, always I can't stand them. So I've like adopted what Brian says and like, hey man, I'll just roll in there with Deebo Samuel in my super flex and see what happens. Like, fuck it. Like maybe I'll hit the 2% outcome of winning the championship. If not, like Brian said, this is why we're in a lot of leagues because you can just kind of write off that league.
The amount of variance like this, by trading away like that type of value, however maybe inconsequential it seems at the time, like you can set yourself back multiple years.
Yeah.
Whereas like the variance on the other side is like maybe Debo has 2 touchdowns and 100 yards in championship week and he's a good quarterback, right? Like that's what it comes down to, right? Like that's just as possible. So let's let it ride and keep the asset. So
I did. Matt, you said the Dak's a great trade buy right now. So I did buy him today. I traded away Kyler and Eckler for Dak and Laporta.
Yeah, I think I like that trade. That's the type of move that I'm trying to like. I'm assuming you're not contending in that league.
No, I'm not contending, but I am contending next year, and I think I've got a pretty good team going into next year. So,
yeah, that's like the perfect type of trade.
Yeah, so Kyler and Eckler for Dak and Laporta.
So
I don't really know what to do with Laporta right now. This is actually the first share I've ever had of Laporta, and I really just don't know how to value him.
I would trade a late first, and then if you get into the mid first, I'm not sure about it, but
yeah. So 2 of his last 3 games, he's gotten 6 targets, and 2 of his last 3 games, he's scored a touchdown. The one thing with him is that Goff does seem to look for him for touchdowns, and at the end of the day, like whenever I'm like watching football on Sundays and like if it's like a matchup that matters and I'm like kind of curious like how I'm doing, it really just kind of comes down to like how many touchdowns my team scored versus the other team scored. And so when you got a guy like Laporta that can score touchdowns on like 8, 9, 10 a year, that's pretty nice and helpful. So whereas like McBride and Kincaid, they can't seem to find the end zone. So we had to find a way to knock Kincaid down one more time before we got out of here. But yeah, Laporta, I don't really know how to value him. I feel like there's probably a lot of take lock on people that have him where they had a guy that was like a 2nd round startup player in the offseason. And so like, why am I going to trade him now? It's like a 5th or 6th round startup player. But like in this scenario, I like Kyler a lot, but yeah, I mean, if you can shed points and Dak and Laporta. I mean, Eckler's kind of like just an ancillary, like 2/3.
Yeah, like he has some utility for contending teams, but
yeah,
he's probably nearing that. Yeah, nearing the end of the road. Like he's like worth a 3rd. So to me, yeah, Laporta mid to late first value. I would definitely trade Kyler for Dak in like a mid to late first value and toss in Eckler if I needed to. One of the trades that I got done that I was pretty happy about with Cousin Pat on one of my contending teams, I had Kyler and Dak, strong playoff team. And Cousin Pat had Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Jared Goff, and he's contending too. And he traded me Justin Herbert and Jonathan Taylor for Dak and Bijan. I was pretty happy about that, but Bijan has finally been fucking killing it. Like
he's been a monster rate recently. He's not even been the running back 1 since week 6, I believe.
Yeah, I don't even know if we're gonna have time to get into him. He is, I think, separating from the pack is like the dynasty RB1. I would much rather have him at this point than Brees and Gibbs and Achane.
Brees isn't even.
I think he's like finally getting the work that we've been expecting.
And let's just shout out Brian. About 5 weeks ago or so, Brees like tumbled down his rankings to like running back 5 or 6. So I'm going to do Brian the justice and say, yeah, you kind of nailed that one. I think he put I think he went ahead and put Ken Walker ahead of Breece Hall it's about week 5, I think, week 4 or 5. And that seems to be kind of coming to fruition. The Breece Hall outlook, not great, boys.
Jacob was about to wring my neck for about a week, so I'm glad it's so far it's kind of trending the right direction.
I still think Breece deserves to be valued close to like I still have him equal to Gibbs. And like one thing while preparing for the show, I was going through Fantasy Calc, and I don't really look at KTC and Fantasy Calc on like a weekly basis anymore. I just feel like I'm in enough leagues, and we have a podcast and we have a group chat. I just have a good idea of most values. I don't look at those websites. Saquon has passed Breece Hall on Fantasy Calc, and I get it. I understand it. I would still rather have Breece Hall. I would still have him over.
That's the win now. I think.
Yeah.
Like as we're
I get it. I mean, I'm a CMC guy, so I understand it. I just
if I've got Barkley on 2 contenders, like how do I trade Barkley for Breece Hall? Like that's kind of difficult. I mean, I don't know. I have a hard time. I would have a hard time just ripping Barkley off that contending team for Breece Hall. I think they're probably relatively similar. I mean, any team that's not like an absolute juggernaut, I would rather have Breece Hall. But like if they're a juggernaut, like let's try to go win the ship with Barkley. Like, and he's going to still be awesome for like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So I mean, I get it for sure.
Before we wrap, I made a couple trades in the last couple of weeks of people we just talked about. So I kind of forgot about them, honestly, speaking of the 80 leagues. During week 8, I traded CJ Stroud and Pop Douglas for Bijan and Pickens. So that was before Bijan's really, really taken off, and Pickens has had a pretty nice little takeoff with Russell Wilson value-wise. Yeah. So
Stroud
that's one.
Stroud and what?
Stroud and Pop Douglas, and then Sean Tucker, whatever.
Yeah.
And then
all right, yeah. Give me the Bijan and Pickens side. I did a rerun of my auction values yesterday or the day before, and I basically used that as like my own personal trade calculator. And I have Stroud I think it was like almost dead even with Bijan.
Love that.
I just don't really give a shit about Stroud being an awesome real life quarterback.
It was a situation. I have strong quarterback play. I hit on Baker as like my quarterback too, kind of thing. So it's like it was expendable at that point too. So it was like getting those 2 young potential long-term studs. Second one, people we talked about, I forgot about this one completely. I gave a late 25-1 for Trevor Lawrence. That was before week 10, so Thursday of week 10. And what's the next one? So that's kind of weird timing, but I mean, kind of speaking to your point, Matt, of just like overall underrated.
Can you repeat that trade one more time?
Yep. I gave a late 25-1. It's the team in first place right now, and got Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, that's a great trade. I would pay mid first for Trevor pretty easily right now.
And then lastly, we talked about Dak. I also made a trade for Dak on this past Sunday. Right before the game, I gave away Tua and Nick Chubb, and got Dak and Javonte. Speaking to your Javonte, Todd.
All right,
so another one that
one again.
Tua and Chubb for Dak and Javonte.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, that's just basically you're just looking at Tua and Dak because, like, in the year 2025, I think Chubb will be better than Javonte, but it's not like that drastic. So yeah, give me Dak.
And to your point, it's a tank team, so it's like I don't want any part of Tua anywhere anymore. So it's like if that's a nice little exit plan, and it can also help a tank, that's win-win.
What would you add to Tua to acquire Trevor Lawrence right now, Brian, if anything?
2.
Yeah,
probably.
I was gonna say a 2. I'd add a 2. I probably wouldn't add 2 2s. Because now you're getting into what is Trevor Lawrence worth? He's worth like what you said, like a late first-ish.
Yeah.
to buy. I'm not paying a mid first, so like a late first. So like now if I'm sending 2-2s and Tua, like sheesh. I mean, now I'm valuing Tua like 2-2s.
Yeah, you're getting into danger zone of like what, again, the ROI, what is best case scenario here in like range of outcomes of buying that that's getting kind of murky for me beyond a 2.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Cool.
All right,
Do we
we
have
got
any
anything
other
else?
cool trades or those were just like the couple that
Yeah,
I thought were interesting, but
I've made a couple trades, more trades. I think I'm at the point in the season now where I'm kind of like teams that are tanking that I've got like some ancillary pieces on. I'm just like, all right, I just got to get these guys off the squad. I moved, and some of them like an Eckler, like that trade. Like I couldn't move them all year. Like nobody, like I'm not going to just trade Eckler for a third. Like I'll wait and see if something comes up. And eventually, like I was able to move him. So like Ridley had a couple good games. I moved him for what's probably like a mid 2, maybe a playoff 2. So Ridley for a 2. What if you had a Ridley on a tank team? What would you be looking for? Would you trade him for a mid to late 2?
I wouldn't. I have a league where I'm trying to actively tank and my team keeps winning and I'm still not going to sell him for a 2 because it's just like,
yeah,
I'll just fucking hang on to him. I think someone will pay more. I think he's got a 30% target share since their bye week. They're throwing the shit out of it to him. So it's like, I don't see his, even if they're inflated short-term numbers, I don't see them going away. So
yeah, I kind of to paraphrase the Titans beat reporter I saw tweet this, that he essentially said that it was close to, since the Hopkins trade, they basically are giving all of the 2 combined first read targets to Ridley now. Like that Ridley and Hopkins used to split first read target share.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're using Ridley around the formation in different ways that they were freed up to do with moving out Hopkins. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Ridley's like a frustrating guy to own, kind of, because especially now that he's producing, you don't want to like if you had asked me a month ago, I definitely would have traded Ridley for a mid to late second.
Well, yeah, I mean, a month ago you couldn't even get a second. You couldn't get any second.
Right.
I was trying to, in the same league I was trying, and now it's like price has gone up the brick. I mean, it's 2-2s now. I'll sell for 2-2s, but until then,
there's no way. I don't even think that. I think it would take like 2 or 3 more big games to get 2-2s probably for him in majority of leagues.
Would you guys, because they're about the same age, would you guys say the same thing about Cortland Sutton, who has a similar trajectory to Ridley? Like the last 3 weeks, Sutton has been killing it.
Ridley's more of a name brand, I think. So it's he's inherently going to be more valuable in market wise.
Yeah, Sutton is closer to like for people to like Mike Williams, I feel like, than he is to.
I mean, if Mike Williams was averaging 20 points a game the last 3 weeks, like,
I think Sutton.
What you're describing right now is
wise,
like mid-second. Yeah, I think that means Sutton's a buy for you at least, Matt. If you're seeing like an obvious gap here, because perception wise,
I would definitely pay a late second for Sutton right now, like a mid to late second, like a playoff second. I would definitely send that for Sutton if I needed help and wide receiver or flex help. That seems like there's not much risk involved. It's kind of like, I think Sutton is entering that, like we used to call this like the Amari Cooper zone, kind of like, Sutton went through an ACL injury that it took a couple years to get back from. Bo Nix has gotten a lot better from the first month of the season when he was a disaster, kind of. And there's no target competition on that team. So I expect. What's
the gap between either of those receivers and Darnell Mooney?
I think Darnell Mooney probably outproduces both of them rest of the year is probably my guess. And he's younger, and he plays with the Falcons.
Yep.
And I know this doesn't really play into much of anything, but he plays on turf, which I kind of like, that having that like little boost. And so we had Mooney easily over those guys for me.
Yeah, like what like I think it's clear that like he would be valued above them, but I'm curious what that gap is. So if you had
not a late 2 to me. I wouldn't pay.
No,
I
no, no,
wouldn't.
no. It's
It
they're
like a
basically
third.
the same type-ish tier. I mean, that big jumble of like older guys that I'm not sure if I rely on them next year or not. Like they're like if you're borderline, if you're kind of a contender, then maybe you're starting them. But if you're like a really good contender or a juggernaut, they're like a flex or bye week starter for you.
I think he's worth
So
2 Mooney.
the one other guy that
There.
the one other guy that is kind of like similar type asset where he's a veteran receiver, probably not going to gain a ton of value, but if you want to trade for wide receiver points for the rest of the year, our guy Bryce, man, to me, I think he sold Juwan Jennings a little cheap in one of our auction leagues. Maybe I'm just thinking that he sold him cheap because I can't buy Juwan Jennings for what he sold him for. But so he sold Juwan Jennings for a 26 third and 2 fourth, 25 and 26 fourth round pick. So a third and 2 fours for Jennings. Jennings had 13 targets last week. He officially took over the X receiver role for San Francisco. After the game, Kyle Shanahan said this was the first game that we installed Juwan Jennings as the X receiver. He did really well. We're going to keep him in that spot the rest of the year with Ayuk out. I think we haven't really talked about Ricky Pearsall, who flashed a good bit this past week. But Jennings is like the overlooked guy in that offense, and I think there's a very strong chance the rest of the year Juwan Jennings is like a high to mid wide receiver too, averaging like 14, 15 points a game. He's going to get a lot of work in that offense the rest of the year, I think.
It's funny because I didn't realize it until like this year when he's like kind of emerged. He's one of my highest owned players because he was just like so incredibly dirt cheap.
Well,
and I certainly
you just added him off the waiver wire.
I would like usually in startups I would take him like once you get into like the 20th round or whatever.
Okay.
Like those are the type of guys that I try and add.
He was on the wire in a lot of
like
leagues.
I haven't searched or I haven't tried trading him at all because I just figured people would devalue him based on like kind of what you're saying. Like Bryce sold him for, I agree. I think probably like less than he could have, but at the same time, I don't remember what the league is, but I'm assuming he's trying to shed those points, and it's an unexpected guy producing points. So he's like, I need to get this guy out of here. I've tried a couple other things and it didn't work. I'm getting him out of here.
I think if you're selling him, you got to sell for a second. I wouldn't sell for anything less than a second.
I tried to buy him on my best team that had some injuries to Diggs and Rice and Godwin. Kind of lost a lot of guys there. I offered Godwin straight up for Jennings and it got declined.
Oh,
so
is the guy taking?
No, the other guy is competing, but he has a deep wide receiver room. Like Jennings is like his wide receiver 5 or 6 or whatever. Like he's got Cedric Tillman that emerged also on this team. This guy is like 5 or 6.
I don't get people that don't want to cut ties in those situations because you didn't invest anything in Juwan Jennings. We know you didn't. Like unless he just traded for him like last week. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like he didn't pay anything to get him to Todd, whatever you're saying, like a 20th or later startup pick or a free agent. Like
yeah, and this is like I said, this is my best team. It's by far like it's 20-0 despite losing Rice and Diggs and Godwin. It's a loaded team. So like the way I was looking at it is like, all right, I'm not going to miss Godwin like in the future. I'm going to have more than enough value to have a loaded roster. And let me just offer him straight up for Jennings. Jennings, I can plug into my flex the rest of the year. I'll be good. I was like stunned when it got declined. Because every once in a while I will send like what I think is like a really strong offer. And usually when I'm sending that type of offer, I'm like, all right, this person's going to accept and I'm happy to overpay because I was stunned by that. So like it does kind of show you the disparity in value between these fringe type guys in some leagues.
I think this isn't necessarily a value discussion, but I think you make a good point on like sending a really strong offer because like for example, the trade that I got offered today, the Dak Kyler one that we talked about earlier. So Dak and Laporta for Kyler and Eckler. I really didn't want to move Kyler, and
Yeah.
I didn't like love the trade, but I thought it was like a really strong offer, and it was strong enough to where like I wasn't going to counter because it was a strong offer. Like I just thought like, all right, I'm either going to accept this or I'm going to decline it.
Yeah.
And so like kind of your point, like you made a really strong offer and you're just shocked that it got declined. Like that does not happen on occasion. It's kind of like frustrating. But I think Jennings is a good one where if you're a contender and you're hitting this point in the season where you've got all these injuries, go out and maybe see if you can get Jennings. I've got one team that's like one of my best teams that is just destroyed with injuries. Like, I mean, just been riddled all season long. I'm going to go out and see if I can get Jennings on that one. And I think the late 2 value issues, I don't have a 2 in that league. So he is on a rebuilder. So I'm probably going to try to get creative here. And I've got Diggs on this team. So you offered Godwin for Jennings.
Yeah. And I have Diggs on my team too. I was going to offer Diggs and I was like,
think that one gets accepted.
I was like, I don't think Diggs will get accepted. Godwin's 28. Like, this will get accepted. Godwin was fucking smashing. I was like, guess not. But
you sent the higher end. You sent the higher end asset, I would say.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, like what I would have done is offered Diggs. He declined, and I'm going to offer Godwin next. But I just offered Diggs for Jennings in that league, so we'll see if that one goes through. I think that next year or next offseason, so they've got now Ayuk, Debo, Pearsall, and now the emergence of Jennings. I think we've got to be coming to a point where Debo does actually get traded this offseason. I don't know how I don't think they can trade Ayuk given the contract that he just signed and the dead cap that they would take on. And Pearsall is just drafted in the first round. So I feel like Debo is probably very close to on his way out this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. They will have to pay Purdy, I believe, this offseason. So
yep, they will.
The only other trade I have that I didn't get to with the Dak and Trevor stuff, I did trade Puka Nacua and Jalen Coker for Drake May on one of the teams I lost Dak. I think that's just about an even trade, but that's how much I like May that,
I would prefer Puka, but I think that May is like probably right on the doorsteps of him. I think maybe Coker was like on the wrong side of the deal. But I mean, it's Jalen Coker. Like, who really cares? I do think Jalen Coker. Like, if I have him, I'm not trading him for anything less than like a late two. Yeah,
no, I agree, and I didn't really
where I might just go shop him for a late 2.
Yeah. So I agree with you on that. I would rather have May than Puka, but I agree. Like same tier, similar value, and it is one of those leagues that you mentioned, Todd, that I don't like getting stuck in this position. But so now I'm just going to roster Lamar, May, and Dak for the rest of the year. Nobody seems to want Dak right now for what I think his value is. So I guess I'm just going to roll into next year with that QB room. But that was the only other trade that I had where I had to replace Dak or Trevor. Still looking for one more league that I got to do something with my Trevor problem or just deal with it like we said.
All right, that wraps us up. I did post here on Twitter here this past week my first like way too early mock draft for 2025. So maybe we will do an extra pod. Maybe we can do that next week. We'll do kind of another rundown. I know we did it a few weeks ago. Matt and I ran through some of the players coming up in this 2025 rookie class. I think we're kind of getting to the point now where we have a pretty clear view of what the consensus top like 15 to 16 will be before we get to the combine. So maybe we can do a run through of that as like a bonus pod next week. You can find Matt on Twitter at Dynasty Peasant. You can find Brian at Brian_O'Leary1, and you can find me, Todd, at Dynasty SFlex. Thanks for joining. Imaginary players, they make